I personally am so honored to have Amy and Annabel here tonight that I asked the library if I could do the intro. So on behalf of the New Canaan Library and in partnership with our charming little bookstore across the green, I would like to welcome you all here this evening for our conversation with Annabel and Amy. Annabel and Amy, we are so thrilled to have you both here this evening to discuss Annabel's newest release, Summer Romance, which is a national bestseller. Summer Romance is on the following bestseller lists: Indie Bestseller List, USA Today, Washington Post, Publishers Weekly, and it is in Amazon Editor's Best Books of 2024 so far. Congratulations to Annabel. And Elm Street Books is here with plenty of copies for sale. It is a must summer read, and it makes a great gift. And if you buy a book, you get a cookie. You know I'm your best bookseller, right? Remember you said that once? For sure, right? Okay. All right, Amy is the author of The Sweet Spot, Musical Chairs, Limelight, and Small Admissions. Amy's writing has also appeared in the New York Times, The Rumpus, Lit Hub, Working Mother, Points and Case, and The Belladonna. Amy taught high school English in the Washington, D.C. suburbs and worked as an assistant director of admissions at an independent school in New York City. We still don't know what school that was. Amy and her husband have 3 sons and live in New York City. Annabel, as you already know, we're so excited that you're here tonight. Annabel is the author of 3 fantastic, charming, funny, and delightful novels. Nora Goes Off Script, Same Time Next Summer, and her newest novel, and my personal favorite, Summer Romance.
Thank you.
And I don't want to go too much into the background, but I just wanted to share this quote from your website. Annabel's claim to fame is being dumped by the cutest guy in Los Angeles twice, and you had dinner with Madonna once.
No, that's not
But
true.
not at the same table, but in the same restaurant?
Oh, yes, that is true. Yes, that is true.
Okay.
She never talks about it, though. It's weird.
A former investment banker, Annabel is much happier writing, and I end quote. Annabel and her husband have 3 sons, and they live in Rye, but are moving to Greenwich. And the reason I mentioned the 3 sons is that you both have 3 sons. And then Susie Schnall, who's here, an author, you have 3 sons. Is there something about 3 sons and writing great books?
Well, nobody ever talks to us at home.
Oh. Anyway, so that's it. Without further ado, I present to you Amy and Annabel.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. I want to say a huge congratulations to Annabel because you have gotten so much great feedback on this book, and I am not surprised. I'm sure none of you. We will not do spoilers tonight, but before we start, I just want to say a huge thank you to Books and to the library and to Heather for hosting this amazingly awesome event.
This is so nice. And I will say about the bookstore, I'm sure you've all been into Elm Street Books, you can't get out of there without a copy of Nora Goes Off Script. Eve will chase you to your car and take your credit card.
But
So
now she says
be
Summer
warned.
Romance is now her favorite.
Yeah.
So,
I apologize in advance when you buy your 6th copy of the book because they are the hand sellers.
Yes. And since you've got such a great book, because the lucky thing to have such an amazing store right in town. Somebody said to me, "What did you love so much about this book?" And I said, "This is a book that will make the most happily married woman on earth wish she were divorced." It's a total fantasy, and I enjoyed every single minute of it. I really did. I'll talk about this more in a minute, but when I say I laughed, I cried. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing about this book, is that you will laugh, you will cry. So before we start, do you want to just tell us briefly, for anybody who has not had the pleasure of reading this book, just what's it about? Like, we want to give us just like a little bit of summary.
So it's about Allie Morris, who is a professional organizer whose life and home are both a total mess. Like, she keeps her mail in the sink. She hasn't gotten out of her sweatpants in 2 years. She's grieving the loss of her mother. She has 3 kids. She's recently separated, and she is just stuck. I don't know if you guys have ever been stuck. I've been stuck. And she gets it in her head that the way she's going to get unstuck is by having a summer romance with this guy who is in town for just the summer. And he's adorable. And it took me a really long time to get him adorable, but we can talk about that.
He is adorable. There's so many things to talk about with this book, but you just start by saying, what was sort of the kernel? What was like thing that sort of got you going on this book? What was sort of the first kernel of...
Yeah, you know, the funny thing about that question is with my other books, I can tell you what the kernel is, and then you see it run through the book. The kernel of this book sort of died out because while I was writing it, I got totally sidetracked by other stuff. But I wanted to write a book about Instagram, and I wanted to write a book about how different our external lives are from our internal lives, and how we show the world, like, you're a professional organizer, but your house is like a dump truck. How different that all is. And the weight that women feel sometimes, you don't need to raise your hands, but like, to work really hard and take care of everybody and look really good while you're doing it. And God forbid you get tired, we've got stuff you can buy on Instagram to make you feel better. Like, it's such a racket. A little bit of that got into the book, and that was kind of my jumping off point. But then it all kind of shifted as I realized that her mother was dead, and I realized that she was moving through a whole bunch of other stuff.
So let's start by talking about this incredible setting. They always say with fantasy writers that they are world builders, because when you write a fantasy novel, you have to create all the rules and all of the, just everything about the world of the book. But you have created a world here. I mean, I feel like I know this town. I feel like I know the people. I feel like I feel like I could just move in there tomorrow. I want to know what your thoughts were on that. You made a fictional town, and right? And you didn't have to. You could have set it in New Canaan. You could have done any of that. What was sort of behind your thinking of how to create this community, this town, like just setting?
Yeah, so you don't, I don't ever write about a real place because someone will call you out. And that street does not run north-south, it runs east-west, and they're gonna give you a 1-star review because you screwed up the town. So just because I'm lazy, I always make up a town. So no, you can't call me out. I actually started writing this whole story without any location in mind. At one point, I had he takes her to this little private beach and they look out on New York City. She's a person who's walked away from her career and her dreams in service of everybody else's career and dreams. It's probably never happened to any of you guys. She's looking kind of longingly at New York City, and that's kind of where I live. So like I live in Westchester, where you look out on Long Island, and in another direction you look out in New York City. And so I loosely based the geography around where I live in Rye, New York. But then I made it, bigger with the bigger people. Ethan's parents are those people in town who they dress up in costume for everything. Yeah. I don't have those people in my town, but I do have a house in my town where they decorate like St. Patrick's Day, like every holiday. They're so over the top, and I love those kind of people. So a lot of it I did pull from my town.
There are so many amazing characters in this book that you will just completely fall in love with. But let's start with the most important one, which is Allie. This book is told in first person, so we are just along for the ride with Allie for her entire adventure. I'd love to know, because Nora was in first person, same time next summer was in first person. Yeah. So what do you think when you're sitting down? This is an author question, but when you sit down to write a book and you are like, it needs to be a first person narrative, what goes into your thinking behind that in terms of like creating all the thoughts and like everything a first person narrative carries the entire weight of the book in their hands. It's a huge responsibility to put on a character.
It is. It's just so funny because Amy's my favorite writer. like if she wasn't here and you were like, I have a question, who's your favorite writer? I say Amy Poeppel every freaking time. So it just cracks me up that she's here asking me this question. Here's what I don't like about when in my own writing. I don't like when I'm aware of myself in my writing. I don't like when I become a narrator. I get really tired of my own voice. So I think for that reason, to write in first person, because I like to have internal knowledge of the character, like what she's saying versus what she's thinking, which is almost entirely. And I also like for her to only know what she knows. It feels kind of mysterious to me. But I think that if I wrote any of these books in third person, there would be so much like Annabelling. And then and I would just be like narrating in a way that it doesn't appeal to me in my voice. That makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And you do it so well. And one thing that you really did with Allie in making me completely fall in love with her, she's so funny. She's very self-deprecating. She has great self-awareness. She's very snarky at times in her head, which is just so fun. Like what you just said, that she'll sometimes say something that isn't what she's thinking, but she'll sometimes comment on what she actually meant. But the humor you got in there was just amazing. Do you sit there and go, so is it just that you sort of get into her head and she happens to be funny? Because that's the Annabelle thing. You're funny.
Humor in writing for me happens entirely by accident. So I have never, and I have actually been like, something funny should happen on this page. And all of a sudden it's like death. Like I am not funny. Like It actually has to happen in the circumstance. And I can sometimes, like, I can see a funny thing in a circumstance and pull it out and put it into a book. The way that I kind of create that situation is by making things as awkward as possible. And that's what I love about writing romance.
Are you awkward?
That's a great question. I would say no, I don't think I'm awkward.
Clumsy or
I'm super clumsy. I can barely use my body, like, in any way. It's unbelievable. But I do like creating, like, romance is awkward. The first time you get naked in front of somebody's awkward. I love that stuff. And I also like writing children, because children walking into a room is awkward. And I think those are great.
And the stuff kids say, like, it's so unscripted.
They're the worst.
I laughed out loud so many times reading this book, and I cried also, but I laughed. Like, this is not a spoiler, but when you talked about the baby, and you said that the baby, because the parents work in a diner, that the baby always smells like hamburgers, and that's actually the only way to improve the smell of a baby.
It's true.
I ended up making, like, a list of, like, just hilarious things that were in this book. You have so many just moments where I was just cracking up. Totally made my day. So yes, shouldery shoulders. That the guy had really shouldery shoulders. I was like, that is exactly
Right. Yes. Have you ever seen a man with shouldery shoulders?
Okay, and then this was another one of my. You said that. Sorry, I'm gonna cry. I'm laughing so hard. You said that that she was trying to be nonchalant, but she was actually being really hyper-chalant, which is like, I literally got my phone out. I was like, that's not a word, chalant by itself. I Googled it because I was just cracking up. You're very funny.
Thank you. This is so fun. I love this party.
On your website, I happened to notice that two things that you like are proms and funerals.
Yes.
And I thought, first of all, it's really funny. And second, that's so perfect for this book because you have so much of, like, sort of excitement of prom and love, like first love and getting asked out and all of that. And you have some grief in this book, like, and you managed to pair those two so well. So I'm just curious to know, how do you do that? Like, how do you strike that balance between the joy, the delight, the love, and then the loss and the grief? And I mean, she's going through some really sad things. Like,
I will say the grief in this book is like, if you've just experienced a grief and you're thinking a loss and you're thinking this, like, trigger alert, the grief is very mild. My mother passed away 15 years ago, so I'm writing the grief with distance. Like, I couldn't have written this book 10 years ago. It would have been like a sob fest. So it is kind of with a light touch. But
I make it believable that you make her state of mind extremely believable. So it's not, I agree, it's not a book that my mother also died 14 years ago, so same. I get what you're saying, that there's, like, a little bit of a distance there. So it wasn't something that reopens wounds. Make her sadness and her love of her mother, it's just palpable. Like, I just believed it.
I think, I mean, it's funny that you say that, the prom and the funeral. Like, isn't this kind of, I think this is just what I'm thinking about lately about life. It's like, it's all so good. Also, yikes. Like, this is what life feels like lately. And it kind of gets back to the whole thing about having a dog, where, did you ever hear George Carlin say that buying a dog is like buying a futures contract on grief? And I don't want to bring the room down, but, like, your dogs are going to die. It's the worst. Like, it is just, and I never had a dog my entire life, and for that reason, I was like, why would you do this to yourself? Like, I've been in popular culture for long enough to know this is a shit show. Long story short, my husband and I went on a cleanse. We went mad, and we decided to rescue a dog. So now I have a dog. But it's having that dog, I'm like...
So that was your first dog, 2018.
Yes, I was 48 years old. We love this dog. And the joy, as you all know, if you have a dog, is totally worth it. Like, it's worth what's going to happen in the end. That's kind of the thing that happens in this whole book. Like, you're going to have a summer romance. It's going to be over on Labor Day. It's a bad idea. Who's not had the best summer romance ever? Is it just me? I had a great summer romance. So yeah, it's just that flip side. It's like the light and the darkness, and you've got to just, like, bring it all in.
And explain how plants work into that too, because you have a lot of garden stuff in your book also, and I feel like those were sort of what do they say, two sides of the same coin or whatever, that it was a little like, that's also rebirth, and you see things and you think they'll never come back again, and then sometimes they do.
And they do. And, like, the difference between, perennials and annuals, like, one is this was something I was thinking about parenting. There's a lot of mother-daughter stuff in this book about Allie's mother was a wonderful mother, but she really stepped in in a lot to help. In doing so, Allie comes to realize that maybe she's lost her voice in her marriage because her mother was stepping in so much. And she has this neighbor, Phyllis, who I adored. She was my favorite character to write, who really believes in just like her philosophy is pull the weeds and let God do the rest. Like, everything is just going to take care of itself.
Say what her other quote was about kids, about get out of the way.
Oh, no,
Give
that's my
birth
mom.
Oh, that's your mom.
Yeah. Did you read that? You must have read that in the
author's
in the
note.
something in the back.
Something,
Yes,
yeah.
my mom. Honestly, this is no joke. I was raised by a woman whose mothering philosophy was give birth and get out of the way. For me, that was such a gift. It was just amazing. I was always fed, and no one ever knew where I was. And it was fantastic. Like, I had so much confidence as a result of that. Allie's experience is kind of in contrast.
Yeah, it's so hard as a parent to know.
This is all I struggle with
Like, if
my
that's
entire
a
life.
spectrum, right? Like,
It's so hard.
Oh, you've got the get out of the way on one side, and then you've got the like really hands-on on the like her mother on the other side.
Yeah.
And how are we supposed to know? Like, what?
There's no, and I think this is because my kids are all adults now, and I struggle with this all the time. What's the right amount of times to remind somebody to file a tax return? Does anybody know the answer to that question? I don't know. I said it twice, and then I stopped saying it, and I don't know. Did it happen? I don't know.
It's so funny you say
It's
that.
really hard.
I actually know it didn't happen. I know it didn't happen.
My kids
And
know better than to
I'm-
tell me.
Well, they don't. He doesn't tell. So he has one of those like an online thing, but somehow my email address got in it. So I know when he files, they say congratulations, like your taxes were successfully filed, and I didn't get that email. And I went, that's a conversation we're gonna have tonight.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Really unpleasant. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to know. So it goes back to this whole notion of balance, like the sad things in life that get so balanced out by the joyful things in life. Like, I just feel like you had so many interesting ways of making me think and making me sort of just reevaluate like choices that I'm making. And
Well, thank you. Does this ever happen to you when you're writing, though, where you're just writing a story and you've got all this stuff, like your supercomputer's running in the back of your mind, and all the stuff's going into the book, and then there's this magic moment where you're like, it's the same thing. The parenting and the plants, that's the same thing. The dog and the summer romance, and it all kind of like gels. That's the heroine of writing a book. That's where you're like, and I mean that like a drug, where you're like hooked and you want to write another book, and it's such a fleeting moment. Does that happen to you?
Totally, but that I think it's so interesting that you said of dogs, like of why do we do this? Like when we know the pain that's going to come, and then for you to sort of tie that to sort of the plot of this book, which is like a summer romance, and if you know something's going to end, why on earth you would be mad? That's what the characters are like. You would be mad to do this. But we do it.
We do it.
We do it anyway.
We keep doing it. She
Yeah.
befriends her 94-year-old neighbor.
Oh yeah.
Good idea? I don't know. I know how that ends. Totally
Even
worth
the
it.
neighbor's like, well, you picked it. Like you.
Yeah.
You went into this willingly. It's it's just absolutely brilliant. There's another topic in this book, and just FYI, in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna remember to make sure everyone else can ask their questions. But meanwhile, I'm like at the top of my list here, so we could be here the entire night. Two more things I definitely will not leave here without asking. One is this whole notion cleaning up and cleaning out, and like just like when that actually was almost like the trigger thing for me, because because I was like, that cabinet, I should go clean out that junk drawer, or I should go, like if you have something that you haven't used in forever. One of the examples is she's cleaning up, and there's this soup tureen, right? So who got a soup tureen when they got married?
I did.
And who uses a soup tureen? Because not only does that mean that you're making soup, it means you're gonna like put it in a thing and then put the thing on the table.
And it's still going to be hot when people eat it.
Like, this is never gonna happen.
It's never going to happen.
So it's this huge, oversized soup tureen with red poppies on it. And I immediately remembered that I got this chicken roaster for my wedding. It was in the shape of a chicken, like this huge chicken. And the salt and peppers that went with it were little eggs. And I moved with that chicken roaster, like from 5 different houses. When I finally looked at it, and I was like, I'm never gonna use the chicken roaster. It's never gonna happen. And the feeling of like getting rid of something, there's like this weird guilt thing. And then you get over the guilt and you're like, no, like it's going.
Yeah, but for a minute were you just feeling like, I can't believe I'm not a person who wants to roast a chicken in the chicken roaster.
believe me, when
I am such a disappointment to the women who have come before me.
Yes, and to the person who made the chicken roaster, who had this like vision.
Yeah.
And
You
the
let
person
her down.
I let her down. I let the person who gifted it to me down. It was never going to happen. And I toted that thing from Maryland to California, back to New York, the stupid freaking chicken roaster. And then it ended up in a box that I labeled last to open. If you have a box that you label last to open, just go straight to the giveaway pile. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, don't open it.
But I just wanted to hire Allie. I just want her to come and like help me. I know her life is not so organized, but she's really good at it. And when you walk her through the steps that she does, I was like, man, she's good. Like, she really knows how to like clean up a mess.
Yeah, that was the most satisfying writing that I've ever done in my life. There's one chapter where she actually cleans out her kitchen. To answer your next question, I am not organized and my house is a hot mess. So it was just like this it was like if I wrote like a marathoner's story. Like, I could never do it, but I want to like experience what that is. But there's obviously this parallel to the emotional stuff that we carry around, and how, you know, it's sometimes so hard to let go of the past. And she has a box with all of her kids' little cleats in them, because remember when they played soccer? I can still remember my kids' little cleats and throw those things away, you know. But she has to move through that. Like, she has to move through all of her stuff to move forward.
One of I can't remember if it was Mr. Hogan or somebody, but they said like a full life comes with a lot of stuff. Like, and I feel like the older I'm getting, the more this is becoming like just irrelevant, because you know, you clean out your parents' house, you clean out your own house, like you move, you help your kids. Sort of, at what point do they take their yearbooks from high school with them? Like, do you want, or do you keep it for them because they think they don't want it, but maybe in 20 years they will want it?
And it's going to be your fault.
Yes, because you threw it. And love letters, you talked about like the daughters finding love letters in, but I have my grandparents' love letters. What do I do with those? This has turned into a totally different show. Annabelle, what do I do?
I don't know. I think
What
you
do I do with
scan
the love
those.
letters?
I don't think you keep the love letters. I think you scan the love letters.
Because the thing is they didn't have texting. So a lot of it is just like checking in. Like, I don't.
Well, it is. I thought that so many times. Right? Like, why are you reading their passionate love letters? And maybe people shouldn't keep those.
I know. It's private.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want my kids reading my love letters.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, can we talk about sex?
I want to talk about sex.
Okay. I am very closed door, and you've got like the door cracked open.
Oh, thank you.
You don't have the door wide open. Oh. Like, in terms of the little chili peppers, how many chili peppers would you give this
if you gave my book 5 stars on Goodreads, or Instagram, that's so nice, you would probably give me half a chili pepper. And the fact that bookstagrammers go to the trouble of making a half a chili pepper for me, that's what I get. I get a half. That's it.
So it's super like, it's very, like you get, even with a half a chili pepper, it is very steamy. It is very steamy of just desire, which you call like carbonation, which I was like, that is such a great euphemism for like horny. It was very clever.
Yeah,
that like bubbling up.
It's the thing before the thing that I find interesting. And then you get a paragraph of the thing, you blink, you miss it. It's a different, I mean, there's so many different ways to write books like this. That's just where I'm comfortable. Like, I'm excited about all this stuff before the kiss.
Anticipation.
Yes.
The anticipation
is
like amazing in this book.
Yes.
I mean, on an anticipation scale, it's like 100 chili peppers.
So many chili peppers.
But if you want to go into the bedroom with them, I don't want to go into the bedroom. I'd rather just know that the bedroom's there.
Well, because they're grown-ups and we know what goes on. So when I wrote Nora Goes Off Script, my editor was like, no. Open the door. We got to see what happens. And I said, no. Like, we're all grown-ups here. We know what happens. It's fine. She said, no. I need to see it. And we went back and forth about this for a really long time until I explained to her, books that I read, there are 2 kinds. They're either body parts in the books, doing things, or there's a feeling, like what it's like for them to be together. And this is my comfort zone. And I'm not, like, it's just not the kind of book. I like those books too. I just not the kind of book that I write. And I was just telling these guys on this particular tour, it's been really fun for me because mothers and daughters are showing up together, that they're reading my books together. People's grandparents are reading my books. Because it's not like a book that you're embarrassed to give to somebody.
It's literally romance. I mean, the romance part. I mean, in terms of just the attraction, the anticipation, and that feeling of just being lit up from being attracted to someone and just adoring them. And like, you just did that so well.
It's just nice to know it's
enough. I got carbonated just reading it.
I remember that feeling.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, you have a crush on somebody and you wake up in the morning and you're like,
And you made us wait.
Yes, I
You
did.
made us wait, which is just perfect because it just keeps that right where it should be.
Yes, that's hard to do. It's hard. It's hard to negotiate. Like, we're grown-ups. Why aren't we just doing this all the time? Which also is another reason I love writing children, because if you have children, you cannot stay in bed all day. I've tried. So that it just like is a little bit of a constraint, and it means you have to sneak around, which is so fun. Date,
Like today, and I just think it's just a very fun thing to read. Like at my age, for example, just the joy of dating. Like a little bit later in life, she's way younger than me, but I'm just saying, like a second, and she's divorced, so like a second chance at something is just so appealing. Right? So I have like a million process questions. So are you guys getting your questions ready? So I'm going to ask. I'll ask a quick process question, and then I'm going to hand it over. But I want to know what your day is like. I want to know about your plant. Do you guys know about pantsing and plotting? That there's sort of two different kinds of writers. The one who sort of plans everything out, and then they deviate from their plan, but they basically know where they're going. And then the total fly by the pantsers, which is the other end of the spectrum, which is where I sit. I know that Susie Schnall is here in the audience, another amazing writer. She and I sit on opposite ends of the pantser plotter spectrum. Where are you?
Sometimes I'm in the fetal position and I just like call out Susie's name. I'm like, why can't I be Susie Schnall?
I know.
I am really the ultimate pantser. I start a book. This one, she's a professional organizer and her house is a mess. Let's see what happens. And I just start writing, and I write as like to the end, and then the sunset, like just to the end, and then I go back to
hammer out a first draft.
I hammer it out, and usually by the second time I do that, I go back and I'm like, what did I just write?
Then how long does that take you? That first
couple weeks, I just like bang out a bunch of nonsense.
Do you take a shower? Like, do you?
Oh yeah. I have great hygiene.
Work days.
Great. No, I like to get up early and write. So I like to write. Like I like to get up at 5, and then I've got to tend to the people. So I write like 5 to 7, and then
you just
after,
kind of lost in your head.
Happily, I am. If I'm not, then it's like trouble, and I've got to get back in. That's kind of where I am right now with what I'm writing. So it's not the best. There comes a moment when I'm writing all this stuff where I understand my character, and I understand who she is and what her wound is. And I wish I just started knowing what her wound was, because really, if you know what somebody's wound is, you can just move them around from situation to situation, and you know how they're going to act. It's sort of like people. We operate from that place, but it takes me a really long time to find that. And so then I go and I start again. It's not really a process.
What does start again mean for you? Do you go back to the beginning of what you've already written? I just heard, who was it? Someone amazing. Lori Frankel, I think, writes that first draft, and then she prints it and she puts it in a box and she sticks it like in the basement, and then she starts over again. So blank document. So she's got it. She's written it. She has it, and then she starts over.
She should be locked up. That's completely insane.
It sounds really, I get it. Like, I understand what
people should watch her. She's got a problem. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Well, Ann Patchett doesn't start writing until she doesn't write any words down until she can see the whole thing in her head. And then she starts writing.
What do you think about that?
I want to punch her in the face.
Okay.
The thing is, and there's just no right way to do this. It's like you can only do it the way that you can do it. And my editor is a very left-brained person. She's like a human laser beam. And so the fact that she has to work with me time and time again is like her karmic debt. Like she just can't. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm using the force. We'll get there.
Do you talk to her along the way, or do you submit that first draft and have
No.
her?
They'd lock me up. Yeah. So I talk to her along the way. Because I'm writing a book a year, and I'm writing a book a year through 2027 now.
Congratulations.
So thank you. So exciting.
And lucky for us. Yay. That means we get.
But it's really not a lot of time. And if, publishing's a business, and if I show her my first draft of my book in March and she hates it, we have a real problem. So I show her something in January. She gives me the compliment sandwich. I just love working with you so much. 30 pages, thoughts, and then you're so pretty. I'm like, wow, that was great. And then I kind of rework it. But we go together the whole way.
Cry when you get there, or do you just like heal yourself and I'm just going to get through these notes when she gives you the 30
There was
pages?
a really bad one this time. And not bad. She's not a mean person, but it was like the book was just not making sense. And you can't argue with that. And I wasn't ready to hear it. So, but now I'm reworking it, and I have a lot to do.
Yes, it does
Yeah.
too make sense. Like,
And the thing about writing a book is you can't go and sit next to your reader and explain what you meant. I wish you could. So the biggest problem that we have is I've got the book, I just didn't get it on the paper. And the recent thing she said about my new book was after, like, it's almost done, I don't understand why he loves her. And I'm like, what's not to love? She's like, it's not on the paper. It being in here does not help you understand it. So that's the process. It's getting it out of here and onto the page.
I just think about the thing about Annabel is that it's not just that the humor is there, the carbonation is there, all of that is there. Just the writing is so good. And I'm going
This
to
is
do
the best day of my life. I'm just going to say.
I just want to read. I'm going to read because sometimes we have readings, and this should be Annabel doing it, but I'm in the mood. So I myself, ball of unfocused longing. When I'm quiet, I can hear my heart yearning for impossible things. I want a perfectly pared down home, and I want to hang on to every scrap of the past. I want to break from my kids without missing a single moment of their lives. I long for partnership, and I long for freedom. I long to be enmeshed with someone without losing myself. I want all of it. Maybe that's the essence of summer romance. It's the impossible thing. A love affair with no reality check. I love that. I love that.
I'm taking that to the nursing home with me. That's so amazing.
So I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
It's just an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you about your process and all of these things. And thank you again to the New Canaan Library and to Heather for hosting us. And thank you again so much to Eve and to Elm Street Books. And pick up a book on your way home. It's better than bringing like a bottle of wine to someone's house because that's just so overdone. Bring them instead a copy of
All of
Annabel's
your
book.
summer gifting should be books this year.
Yes.
Amy, this has been honestly the highlight of a super highlighted month for me. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for even reading my book.
Are you kidding me?
And thank you guys
I've
all
read
for
all of
coming.
them. Thank
So
you
thank
all.
you.